and we're back for another big weekend. So I think, look, anything that helps elevate the event and makes it a bigger event, in this case a 3-day weekend, a holiday, and Juneteenth having really been originated and bigger in Texas than everywhere else, I think it's the perfect venue for that to happen.
And that being the perfect venue, this seems to be like the perfect weekend. You guys literally aren't going up against anything. The Warriors won, so they're not playing tomorrow night. No UFC, like perfect weekend. What can the people expect out of this fight? Because obviously a lot of eyes on it, especially after Tank just helped Rolly off the stage.
Well, there's to be successful, you do need a little bit of luck. We got some luck in the Warriors. They're cooperating. The NBA is cooperating, and so we've got a good runway. But the reality is, I'm looking forward to a really great event. I think we got two young, upcoming fighters in Rolly Romero and Jesus Ramos. They're not household names yet, but the whole point of putting them on a card like this is so people will get to know them. I think they're two of the more exciting fighters that people haven't really paid a lot of attention to. Then you've got Lara in the co-feature. He's a battle-tested veteran, and he's been a lot more entertaining, lately in his fights than maybe his previous ones.
We saw it last week in Phoenix, and we're seeing it again this week with some young fighters getting TV time. Last week, I believe it was a 19 and 22-year-old with the opening bout on Showtime. So why the younger fighters? Do you think maybe it'll help attract younger audience, of course?
Well, it's about developing the next generation, and we sort of have gotten a little bit of a formula on championship, and we apply it to pay-per-view too. You've got your big fight in the main event, you've got your co-main event, which will usually be something like an eliminator or something to position somebody in a title. And I think the best use of the opening fights is to start introducing those talent. We're proud of the fact that we helped develop the 2020 prospect of the year, in Jaron Ennis, and the 2021 prospect of the year in Brandon Lee. Now that doesn't happen without committing and giving those guys support. Now those guys, do their part and look impressive in the ring, but it's our job to identify the guys that we think are most promising, and women, and put them on a platform where they can succeed.
Steven, what's the possibility of Jaron Ennis getting the Keith Thurman fight?
I like it. It'd be an expensive fight, but I think it's worth it. I think Jaron's got a lot of opportunities. I mean, would love to make a Virgil Ortiz fight. I don't know if Golden Boy's interested or not, but I know Jaron would make that fight. Love to make a Stanionis fight.
They ain't doing business, Steven. Come on.
Look, there shouldn't be a reason not to. I know they just signed a DAZN deal, so maybe it's a little harder now than it was last week. But that's what's going to happen. In order to elevate these guys, they got to get the big fights.
What's the level of interest for Jaron versus Keith or Jaron?
Well, I love that fight. I love the Stanionis fight. I mean, at this point, everything that Jaron does is going to have to be meaningful. Put him in a position. If it's not a title fight, it needs to get him one step closer to a title fight. And Stanionis, Thurman, 3 or 4 other fights. They're all in that conversation.
Lastly, with Jermell unifying 2 weeks, or undisputed, 2 weeks ago, where would you like to see him go next? There's talks of Maul maybe going up to 68, so obviously those belts at 60 would be there for Mel, but what would you like to see him go in Showtime as well, obviously?
Well, I think look, he's got some obligations, he's got some mandatories, and some obligations he's going to have to take care of, but there's a younger generation that's waiting there. We just had Tim Tszyu debut on US TV. We've had Fundora look really strong in the step-up fight. Whether those guys will be the next fight or 2 or 3 fights down the line, there are still big fights for him in 54. Now 60 would be interesting too, but I think he's got a lot of options at this point.
Now real quick, just going back, you said the Boots fight would be really expensive. It's because the Cameron Duncan and Al Heyman, Boots is signed to Showtime, right? And
yeah, it's just because it's a big fight. Keith's been a star for a long time. He's got a certain level of purse. Boots has a certain level of purse, and it's an expensive fight. Now that doesn't mean it can't happen or it shouldn't happen. It's worth it. I mean, that's a really mouth-watering matchup. But it's not just that one fight that we're chasing. There you know, lots of opportunities for Boots that, you know, we need to continue to move him up and put him, help him get into a position where he can challenge for a title.
He has like a deal with Showtime, exclusively, meaning that there's more than just, oh, they're both on Showtime or they fight on Showtime. Is that he has his people that has to work with.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
The reality is, look, when we've done a lot of work with him, we're making a commitment to him that we're going to continue to feature him and give him opportunities. He's making a commitment to us that he's going to continue working with us. And, you know, even if we didn't have that, you know, it's been a great relationship. You really can't argue with the results. I think we've been a big supporter and helped him get in the position that he's in. He's done his job in the ring, looking fantastic every time he goes out. And I think, look, everything's clicking, so we're just going to keep putting him on that platform and watching him succeed.
And now there's been like talks and circulating of like a Spence and Crawford going on. Obviously, you want to be the network that hosts that fight. You know, what would it kind of take? Like, how do you get into that position? That and do you play an influence at even making that fight happen? You know, making it closer.
I'll pitch in, you know, if it's helpful. You know, you don't want to be too many cooks in the kitchen in complicated situations. But look, I think there are three elements to the deal. There's, do the fighters want it? You know, and that's very clear. Both of them are absolutely. Are there any, you know, the promoters want it or there promoter obstacles? You know, that's out of the way. You know, we don't have that problem anymore. So the question is now, just can we make a deal that makes sense? So I'd say we're 2/3 of the way there. Now that last third is a big piece.
Which is that third? Just curious. Is it the money?
Yeah, making the deals for the fight. You know, and making sure everybody's happy. It's a reasonable deal that works for everybody involved. So, you know, that's the last step. But, you know, the other two elements have been resolved. Now it's just about sort of, let's make the numbers work and get this done.
Is there any concern?
Is this like a Vegas fight? LA, New York?
Look, I don't think there's any venue who is entertaining boxing that wouldn't want to be involved. You know, whether it's, you know, the Cowboy Stadium at AT&T, whether it's, you know, Raider Stadium, whether it's Staples Center, whether it's, you know, here at Barclays, you know, there's no one that's not going to be interested in hosting that fight.
It's a good thing you asked that because, you know, Cowboy Stadium obviously would be home, you know, to Earl. But what about Alliance Stadium in Vegas? The stadium fight, I think you could definitely sell out that stadium with the
I love the concept of, you know, I love being in Cowboy Stadium. I'm a Cowboys fan. I love that there. But, you know, if people wanted it for neutral ground, then I think, yeah, Vegas Stadium makes the most sense.
Now going back to I know other people will want that fight. I know Fox and Showtime have been the two networks to host a lot of these great PBC fights. Is there other networks that may want to pitch in for the Crawford
I'm
Spence?
sure. I'm sure there, again, like just like every venue would want this fight. There's not a network that wouldn't want that fight. But I think our work speaks for itself. I think our production speaks for itself. I think our ability to market and promote speaks for itself. You know, we're doing the best fights. We're doing more of the big fights than anyone else, and I think that's worth something.
Do you think that fight like rivals like 1 million pay-per-view buys? I know that.
You know, it's tough. Like, you know, the market is changing. There's a ton of piracy, so it's not. You know, we're not in the days of Mayweather where it was sort of on automatic of getting 1 million buys. It's just a different market. It's a different, you know, different level of competition, different level of piracy. So, I don't know, is it, you know, 400, 500, 1 million? I mean, your guess is good as mine. I mean, some of this is a little bit of luck. Is, you know, once you announce it, it sort of catches fire and spreads. I mean, that's what happened with Mayweather-Pacquiao. You know, everybody knew it was big, but I don't think anybody knew it was going to catch fire like that. So with a little bit of luck, sure, it's 1 million or more. Am I going to sit here and guarantee it? You know, I definitely can't say that.
Is there an opportunity there for like 3 or 4 city tour between Dallas?
That'd be interesting. Yeah, that would be really interesting. To some extent, it depends on sort of, you know, when the fights get made and how much time we have. I mean, that's the one thing. If we're going to do that, we need to have the fight made well in advance, so we have time to do a tour without impacting, you know, the fighters' camps.
That would bolster the pay-per-view numbers with that city tour. At least a 2-city tour, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I'm a fan. Like, I'm not saying it has to be 10 cities like we did for Mayweather Canelo. Although, look, I really enjoyed that. That was a really interesting, you know, part of my career. But yeah, I'm in favor of at least a handful of cities.
How would you treat Bud on Showtime? I know he's kind of had like mixed feelings where he was at. Would you guys open up the red carpet, treat him like the
absolutely.
superstar?
Look, he is a champion. He is one of the pound for pound best in the sport. He deserves his respect, and he'll get it. Look, when Tyson Fury came over to fight Deontay Wilder, he was treated respectfully and fairly. I mean, we don't show favorites, in that regard.
And then ultimately, lastly, Wilder just kind of had his little emotional statue revealing the other day, and he was mentioning that I might come back. You guys hosted some of those. Are you guys going to kind of bring Wilder back at home and maybe like a Barclays Center or something as an introduction back into the heavyweight scene?
Look, I think I would love for him to come back at the Barclays Center. I think they got a lot of affection for Deontay here. But by the same token,
Hey, this fight.
by the same token, like, look, the sport needs him back. I think it's good for the sport. If he's going to come back and do some big events, like, that's great for the sport.
This fight.